And when you're in a community where there's been blight, or you've been trending in the wrong direction for a while, and you're just starting to rebound, people know and are more receptive to change because they're discontent with the condition things are in today. And so we're starting to see that.
Hey everyone, my name is Ethan DeLeon, and I'm here with our founder and CEO of Small Nation, Jason Duff. Today we're excited to have Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo from the Hartstock Realty on the show with us. We want to welcome you to the Small Nation podcast, where we share some of the valuable lessons with what we have learned about entrepreneurship, real estate, economic development, and more. The point of this podcast is to create value for you, the listener, and to create a space to learn, talk about what's trending, and inspire others. So Jason, can you shed some light on how you were first introduced to Garrett and Seth?
You got it. So welcome, guys. Seth and Garrett, welcome to the show. I was introduced to them because these guys love real estate, and they just happen to be working in LA.
Wait a second.
So the Lima area is in Lima, Ohio, which is in Northwest Ohio, Allen County. So where we're at here in Bellefontaine, it's about 30 minutes away. And happened to growing up in Logan County, which is a sistering community. When I was young, it was a special treat to be able to go to Lima, because that was a much larger city, 4 or 5 times the size from our county seat, which was Bellefontaine here in Logan County. So if we were celebrating a dinner, we would get to go to Red Lobster. So Red Lobster on Harding Highway, the cheddar biscuits, the Cheddar Bay biscuits. And again, shopping growing up, Lima Mall had 3 or 4 anchor department stores: Elder Bierman, what was Lazarus, that then became Macy's, and Sears. And then plus they had a KB toy store. And for those that are listening, I'm kind of showing my age. Like,
I was going to say,
it was the toy store until in Lima got a Toys R Us,
Which is now out of business.
Yeah, go on.
love
Okay, you're making me feel really good, by the way. So all of those things I just mentioned, Macy's unfortunately closed. Yeah. Elder Bierman's long gone, and a lot of things change. But you guys work as real estate professionals. You're also realtors for a brokerage called Hartstock Realty.
Yep.
And I've known Jeff DeMulch for many years. He's the founder, someone that I have admired in real estate investing. You know, Jeff started buying single family homes, and of course that grew to everything from multifamily to some commercial to some industrial. And when you surround yourself with other people that are like-minded, that are investors, it's a great way to get good ideas. So probably 8 or 9 years ago, Jeff reached out to me because he'd heard that we were doing some work here in Bellefontaine to revitalize the downtown and buying and investing in historic buildings. And he just came and he said, I want to buy you coffee. So we did coffee, and he just said, tell me how you got started. And what's powerful about those coffee conversations is you get to share your origin story, like why you got started. You also get to share like something that you can brag about. I mean, do you not know a real estate investor that's like, hey, let me tell you about this deal. Like I hit this home run and it's cash flowing, massive amounts of money, and it like takes no work at all. Do you go to those networking events and like, oh my God, they come in the polished suits and like really fancy, that the business card is made of like platinum. And again, what I appreciated about Jeff, and this is like my speed of things, is that he is genuine. He is authentic. In none of that, like you wouldn't know he has got a single thing. But when he spoke, and I think that was the difference, he was speaking from experience, where he shared with me, hey, this is what I've learned. This has been my perspective. And I think it was that kind of conversation that I was like, he's someone I want to keep in my Rolodex, and he's someone that I want to lean on if I get in a situation where I don't know how to solve something, that I can reach out to him. And I think if you were to ask him, he would feel the same way about me. Even though we're in different markets and in different communities, there's that kind of camaraderie that we're all learning and growing together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about you guys. How did you meet? How did you get started working with Jeff? And of course, now building your own portfolios and doing real estate investing?
Yeah, so it's really funny. We Seth and I knew each other prior to real estate. We did some youth ministry back in the day together.
Back in the good old days.
So you were wild kids then, right?
We were, yeah. Well, and to be good at youth ministry, you have to have a couple of screws loose, and you pretty much subject yourself to the judgment of middle school and high school students, which either breaks you or makes you, But no, we had a lot of fun with that, and then I got started in real estate, and Seth was working at Beer Barrel as a manager there in Lima.
Favorite menu item at Beer Barrel?
Italian combo.
Okay.
My favorite sub, but pizza is just my bread and butter there.
You said it was better than the 600 downtown.
Okay.
Oh, let's fight. Fighting words. Fighting words.
Your words, not mine.
Yeah, well, where do we go to some of lunch that comes today,
guys?
down to personal preference, but yes, I do. I mean, Beer Barrel is my favorite Beer Barrel place, my favorite pizza place in the region.
Yeah,
by far.
So Seth was looking for his first real estate property investment, and I got into real estate. I started sharing with him. The interesting thing about Hartstock is it's not just a real estate brokerage. It blows my mind how many real estate agents help people buy and sell real estate and never buy a piece of real estate themselves outside of their primary home. And Jeff is somebody that's very contagious about real estate investing. And when I got started, he quickly shared to me the power of wealth building through real estate. So I started doing that. I'm kind of like an ambassador. I just started sharing with other people the power that it had.
Garrett puts a bug in my ear. He's like, "Hey, you ever thought about real estate investing?" I'm like, "Huh." I'm like, "Actually,
sounds like an MLM
buy my
pitch.
course. It's
like,
only $99 a month."
I was like, "Actually, yeah." And I was going through business school and I was completing my master's program. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm interested in being an entrepreneur." Kind of that whole mentality of being a business owner and having something for yourself and doing something for yourself. And so he actually recommended me to Bigger Pockets. So for anybody listening to this podcast, Bigger Pockets is a great podcast for a lot of real estate resources, stories, and people and content. So I started just consuming and eating anything from Bigger Pockets and listening to hundreds of podcasts from them.
Yeah, you went deep.
I went deep. I mean, I was just like, wow, at my work day, if I was doing something around the house or working on a property, I was just letting it play and just listening, and I bought a couple of their books and started to notice that a lot of these successful investors, they were either a real estate agent first and started investing, or they were an investor and just to get an edge up, they became a real estate agent at some point in their career in order to kind of immerse themselves in the business. And I was like, you know what? That could be a good idea. So I kind of reached out to Garrett and we started that conversation.
Prior to that, though, you became a real estate investor first. I sold you your first property, a duplex that was cockroach infested. So,
actually, what kind of cockroaches?
So they were German cockroaches.
Yes,
we are all too familiar with them here.
Familiar with those. So
they have an undeniable accent.
Well, at least you can. No. Listen.
Dads on a podcast.
So what's special for those that are listening about getting German cockroaches is they don't need a food source because they eat each other.
Dude, it's insane.
Which is actually how you kill them.
There's so much into getting rid of cockroaches, and they're tricky. And everybody kind of knows that, but you don't know it until you actually know it. And it ended up taking me in this small duplex. Each side's only 1,050 square feet. It ended up taking us about 3 months to completely get rid of the cockroaches in this contained area. I mean, it's like, and you gotta bait them.
In Florida they call those palmetto bugs because they're like the bugs of royalty. If you were an agent in Florida, you would just be like, you'd walk in and see some. You're like, oh, you're so blessed because your property is infested with the bugs of royalty. They're palmetto bugs.
It doesn't have the same appeal.
That's very palatable. Yeah. That's
Yeah, we know our cockroaches out here in Midwest Ohio. So can you break down you mentioned that you heard a lot of people did both, the combo of investing in real estate and were agents themselves. So what would be the benefit of doing both? Because I hear a lot of people do either or. So why did you guys choose that path?
I think it's the difference of the more you do something, the more reps you get in, just like you guys have figured out, the better you become at it. So we're helping people do it all the time. And by nature, when you're, there's even a difference in a full-time agent and a part-time agent. I have nothing against part-time agents. There's some very successful ones out there that are professional, and it's a good gig for them, a good living on the side. But, just a point of reference, like Seth in his first year did more deals than a part-time agent did over 5 years. So it condensed his learning into like a very concentrated track. And so we've just been in contact with so many scenarios that then translate to building wealth for ourselves through real estate investing. And then you're just in proximity, to people who they need you to solve a problem. And sometimes they don't want their property listed for the wide public to look at and view. So you're in a position then to solve a problem for them and also build wealth for your family. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but those are the two biggies.
Yeah.
And I just asked, when you started, where did you go to get your education, and then what were some of the things that you pulled away from that?
Yeah, so to get my real estate license, we used Honduras College. And they actually now can do a whole online program. So I did my entire licensing program online, and it's supposed to technically be 120 hours of like coursework, essentially videos, things to read. And then you go and take the state and national portion test. So my license is only good for Ohio, and then I would have to get relicensed for the state, a different state. But, a lot of that's theory, though, a lot of that's schooling. So really, you kind of get your license, and then you still don't know anything, and then you start training at a brokerage.
I feel like that's like a lot of education is that it's great to like read certain concepts in a book, but until you get out and actually are practicing, it's, like you said, theory.
Yeah, it's really just a wide base. It's like you kind of get familiar with terms, processes, appraisal, and kind of what those things are, but you don't know how to do anything as far as being a real estate agent until you get in there and get some training and start getting reps in and get around people that are doing it.
Well, that's the thing is it's a very apprentice model, real estate is, which is ironic because a lot of real estate agents can be territorial, right? So there's not incentive for real estate agents to share knowledge with one another because you're operating in the same market as them. And, a lot of people have kind of the scarcity mentality in that. We've been blessed to be around people and agents who are very collaborative in nature and have more of that abundance mentality, that by them sharing a tip or a business practice with me, that's not stealing from their own pocket because their success doesn't hinge on what they share with other people. It's generated by themselves. So we try to be those with other people, with other agents, with other investors, but not every agent's like that.
Yeah.
Well, and let's just be honest, like when you think of, there was a survey that came out in 2022, like highlighting careers that, can sometimes be viewed as unethical. And how do you guys feel like being stacked up in a list with used car salesmen?
I was verbatim called that one time. I was representing the seller, and we were meeting with a potential buyer, and we were the marketing arm for this builder who was doing new construction stuff. And I was there to help facilitating the conversation because the builder is very pragmatic, talking about construction methods and answering those questions. And I was there to represent the cost of the home and the market and what it would get on the open market. And taking the pressure off him that way. And the buyer looks at me halfway through the conversation and he's like, "You're just a used car salesman, aren't you?"
Ouch.
Yeah. You don't really know what you're going to say in those moments until someone says something. And I don't even know what I said, but I was just kind of like, well, out of the mouth speaks the overflow of the heart. So that's what people view real estate agents as, some people do. So
some people, that's right.
Yeah. And I think the problem is, again, this is in the industry, you have a small minority ruin a perception and smear for the whole. So there's these generalizations because I had a bad experience once with a realtor. All realtors are like this. And there's honestly a lot of overconfidence in a seller's market. Sellers think that they have gold and that they have no place for a realtor.
Yep.
And they think it's all about marketing, but they have no idea the expertise that comes in the title work and in the lending aspect of things. I mean, we keep deals together because of our expertise, and there's a lot of emotions that are involved in real estate. So in some ways I feel like a counselor, talking someone down off the ledge and saying, hey,
that's where our youth ministry training came into play. It's like really, focusing on the emotions people are feeling and how to help them through it. So,
yeah.
Well, and if you think about it too, the schooling, the education, the practice of you actually being in the field, you develop some sophistication with understand how to price a property. The appraisal side of it, even if someone moves into contract and it's at a amount that's a really big number, if it doesn't appraise that way when the banks and the underwriting happens, the deal doesn't get done. And so I just think you mentioning that's one piece that you as professionals, as realtors, as real estate professionals can add value. Are there any others that for those that are listening, even an investor being connected to a realtor, ways that makes sense?
Absolutely. Like it's highly network based. There's ways that we help people that don't line our own pockets. I had a lady call me the other day, and I've been walking with her for the last couple of years. She's in her 80s. She is the sharpest lady you'd ever meet. And she's in the stock market. She owns 9 duplexes in a neighborhood in Lima, does very well for herself, was a school psychologist, like super unassuming. And you will not pull the wool over her eyes. I mean, she knows her stuff. She'll watch the land transfers every week. So she'll tell me what her duplexes are worth. And she knows down to like $1,000 the values of each of her properties. And she called me the other day interested in a property. And she wanted to deal with another agent and not me. And that was fine. I was like, hey, Sherry, you know, I add value to you, and I don't have to be a part of this because I know that there's a relationship here that goes outside of this one transaction. So we're consultants, you know, and sometimes that gets abused by clients and you have to kind of draw some boundaries. But by and large, we just try to add value to the nth degree and believe it comes back to us.
And what's cool about focusing kind of maybe on the investor side at times is that we get to rub shoulders with a lot of investors that are newbies and a lot that are very proficient and very intelligent and have a lot of units and are doing a lot of cool things. But we love real estate, and even though I haven't been in it a long time, I love helping people figure out how to get in their first investment property. So we've done that for a lot of our friends and a lot of the people in our circle of influence and got them excited about real estate. And they never were planning on being a real estate investor. Yeah. And so that's been a really rewarding and cool portion of this.
Yeah, we're able to bring people off market deals. We've had a number of buddies. You don't know what you don't know, so it's a lot of education. We've got guys that are like, I'm going to go buy a house, and we're like, hey, you could do that. But what if you bought a duplex? And what are the advantages of buying a duplex, living in one side and renting out the other? And you start to see wheels turn, and it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of power there. And so it's just fun to see light bulbs come on for people.
Yeah. Jason, this, idea of getting, your real estate license and, going into investment yourself is not all too much different from, how you got started, but you kind of went a little bit.
The one comment I'll make is I got my license when I was 18 years old. Yeah. Okay. So it was the minute I could do it, one of my mentors said, like, you need to do this. And when I got it, I just have to admit, I kind of failed as a realtor. Number one, we had an economic crisis that hit. So, the market, there just weren't a lot of people buying. And then the access to capital was really, really tough to find. So, I was planting my flag with anything that I could get listings, mobile homes at Indian Lake. And then I ended up getting a commercial listing in downtown Bellefontaine. And the listing was actually advertising the property for lease. And the building owner at the time was really struggling to try to fill this space. And she gave me a pretty awesome incentive. She said, if you can get a multi-year lease, I'll give you the first 6 months rent as commission. Wow. Now, I took this back to the brokerage, and all the other agents, many of them were part-time, said, well, is she going to give you 1 month? And I noticed that she offered me 6. Their eyes got really big. It's like, how did you get her to do that? Well, the first thing that I think, and that's where your first deal, even though things are really hard, when you actually accomplish getting that contract, that first sale, there's something magical that happens. Oh yeah. It double down and validates the work that you put in, that you can actually accomplish it. So we end up leasing her space to a catering company. I got that first check. The brokerage took their cut, but I still got my cut. And it just felt really, really good. And so that really kind of inspired me to want to do more commercial real estate and make my focus helping renovate, develop, and lease spaces.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I'm just going to ask a question here. So you kind of took the opposite approach, because I know you had your real estate license and you actually kind of you put that on hold. You set that aside in order to be an investor. So you saw those things like you'd be a better investor without your license, which is a little different than Seth and I's approach.
It is, and I think that's why I like having you guys on. For me, I think the license became a challenge as I was scaling and growing, because the marketing efforts that I was doing for the properties. You know, when you're a licensed real estate professional, there's licensing law that governs how you negotiate and handles transactions. And there's reasons why that's in place.
Right.
But when you start to get multiple self-storage facilities, multiple commercial properties, you know, I was advertising on billboards at the time. And just what happened, you know, a lot of other agents were saying, oh, did you put this little logo at this place?
Right.
Is this font that size? And it just kind of became where it became
You had a target on your back.
And I think that's when you achieve success.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are rooting and cheering you on, and you're also going to occasionally hit people that are jealous and are going to want to try to tear you down.
It's funny that you have people that are like with you. I'm excited as long as your success doesn't outpace theirs. And the moment that like that invisible threshold crosses, it's like, haven't heard from you in a while. Oh, no, I've just been busy.
But you know, and I think that's usually except people are messy.
Yeah.
And you're very lucky. And I think that's one thing, just seeing the way you guys interact, the way you do business, you know, there are statistics that show that partnerships fail. And we were talking a little bit before the show, and while the work that you do together isn't maybe what you would deem a legal binding partnership, you found that your values, you found that the way that you're working together, do you kind of look at it like a partnership?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, pretty much any decision. I mean, we're kind of like, hey, what do you think? Bouncing it off of each other. And we're kind of building out that partnership more and more and more as far as like advertising budgets and how rebranding and how we want to kind of move forward with even our gross commissions. What are we going to set aside? And so, yeah, it's definitely developing into something a little bit more, you know, verifiable, something that has some boundaries. But yeah, it's really just a handshake agreement right now,
which I know makes a lot of people cringe. I mean, on one hand, like you said, it's not a written thing. It doesn't need to be now. There may come a point where it would have to be documented, but I'm under the impression, like, you know, even any good partnership, that everything is built on trust, but having a written contractual portion of that does not mean that there's not trust there. It's just defining things and communicating. So I don't see them as exclusive to each other.
And it really depends. Like, we would never recommend for our clients to do a handshake agreement if two people were partnering in on a property together.
Right.
Which is always a bad idea. But this is a little bit different. We're not really getting ownership in anything. So it's a little bit more fluid.
And I know earlier today we were talking about, you know, your choice in branding that together, a lot of the work that you do together. So maybe talk about some of the advantages of why you chose to do that.
So I think we just got out of a realtor convention at a state level this last week, and there was a real estate coach that was talking about essentially the first thing that people decide to do is spend money on marketing. And she said it's a very backward approach because you don't even know what you're spending marketing on. Like, why are you marketing? Who are you marketing? And I'm a big Simon Sinek guy who's just organizational leadership. I love his books, and one of his more prominent books is Start with Why. So for us, I think our why lines up. For me, I see agents all the time that high producers, very successful, make tons of money, no life.
Yeah.
I mean, they work all the time, no boundaries, and their relationships are fraying. And I'm like, at what cost, right? There's value comes more than in the way of money. And you know, her question was, are you running your business or is your business running you? And so for me, I just have other values outside of making a lot of money. And there was a ceiling then that I hit of what I could do to provide for my family and achieve goals, and without having to sacrifice those things. So then when Seth came along, it was perfect because now I didn't have to turn down business. I could help him win and get started and still go above that threshold that I could do by myself. And Seth has the same goals.
Yeah, and, you know, family is important to both of us. You know, we have young kids, babies, and so we want to be home and want to be active. We want to benefit from what being a realtor allows us to do with the flexibility. And so, yeah, when I joined in, though, I was like just desperate for anything. I was like, I'll literally do anything for just to get started.
I kind of took advantage of that.
Truth comes
because
out.
it really is hard to get started. And from the time when I started to the time I received my first commission check, I mean, it was 3 months. But even before I got started with my license, I mean, there was a period where I was making almost no money while getting my license. And so it was definitely a period of drought. So when I got started, I was like, just give me anything.
I had this one client that I'd been working with for a couple months, and I knew this guy was going to be I love the dude, but he's very analytical, engineer, like super smart, but at his own detriment. So now imagine, him being a first-time home buyer and the expectation level he has on that. So then Seth, he's getting started, and I'm like, hey man, maybe I'll feed you some clients and
Garrett
stuff.
saw me coming a mile away. He was rubbing his hands together. He's like, oh yeah, fresh meat.
I'm gonna change this guy's name just to provide some anonymity. But I was like, hey Tim, I was like, super exciting news. I've got a team member who's joining me. I think we're going to be able to better serve you because you're going to have access to both of our schedules. Why don't you meet Seth? And he knew Seth a little bit, so there was a prior relationship. I was like, Seth, do you want to help Tim do this and find some houses? And then I just kind of I wheeled away.
Yeah, no, it took a while. And I don't even know how many houses we looked at. We looked at a lot. We put a few under contract. It was a really competitive market. And just the price point was tough to work with. Eventually we made it happen though, but it was probably the hardest client I've ever worked with. And it was my first one. So it was a good learning experience, a good springboard to really get involved in a lot of situations.
You're welcome.
Get involved with a lot of other agents and really get my feet wet with negotiating contracts. So
that's awesome. Jason, we previously had Jesse Lear on the podcast talking about his approach to real estate with Epicurean Properties. Can you maybe point out how these two approaches are different and maybe some of the pros and cons of each?
Well, I think this is a great conversation point. There is so much innovation happening in real estate right now.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that a company like Airbnb would have existed today?
Yeah.
And we had on Jesse highlighted, he met his wife, Chelsea, who is from Lima. He grew up in the Gahanna area, and, they stayed and took vacations in Airbnbs around the country. And they kind of came back thinking of new business ideas and started renting apartments in desirable, walkable neighborhoods and designing and curating and putting the right furniture, everything down to the bathrobes and the types of soap in the kitchen. Like these little, the little tiniest details really matter. And they have built 40 of these Airbnb units using the rental arbitrage model.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
It's fascinating. I mean, Airbnb has opened up a whole nother income approach to real estate investing. Before you look at a property and you kind of think on the back end, like, what's your rental strategy? Is it going to be a long-term lease? Is it going to be a corporate rental? Is it going to be a midterm rental? Really the Airbnb model prior to there being Airbnb was like VRBO. It was very vacation rental centric. And then they democratized it and kind of opened up this whole nother way of looking at real estate. So it's been exciting to see people leverage that model. A caveat with that is because of just the demand of real estate is you have people overpaying for real estate, and the only way that property will work is if they run it as an Airbnb. So now they're hedging their bet on this strategy with no real backup plan. And before, like for us, we try to be very conservative in the way we look at investment properties. So I would look at it and I would say, will this cash flow with a long-term lease? Yes, great. Now, bonus is if I can do an Airbnb model, that's all profit to me. But you have people out there that are only buying it based on the Airbnb model. Well, I mean, imagine being in a major metro like San Francisco where they crack down on Airbnb regulation.
One law, one vote.
Done.
And
your whole strategy comes unfolding, but you still have the debt. And, maybe you're upside down on the property now. And so there are some definite caveats to that. You have to know your craft. I wouldn't say just jump in, but I think it's incredible with the arbitrage model because essentially these people are investing in real estate without the overhead of owning the real estate, which I think is genius. And their exit strategy.
It's kind of counterintuitive because when you think about, you mentioned bigger pockets. And another, a book that was really important to me when I first started real estate investing was reading Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And then once you start getting tied into Robert Kiyosaki, you're learning about the cash flow quadrant. You're learning about, investing in currency and silver and gold and all of these other kind of asset classes that for new investors are important to learn. But he talks so much about learning from his rich dad, the importance of owning an asset instead of going to work for someone else and getting paid a paycheck. identifying and finding an asset that you own, that you're getting passive income and that asset's working for you. What I think is so fascinating about this rental arbitrage is you really don't own the asset. You own a lease, you own an agreement, but you're making the spread in between.
They're not capitalizing on equity pay down,
depreciation.
Right. I mean, they're basically just figuring out a way to scale a rental and just get the cash flow. So I mean, they're probably just getting all this cash flow if they have built up to 40 now.
And they are happy as a lark doing that because there are some dark sides. I mean, you mentioned when you first bought your deal, inheriting the cockroaches.
Inheriting the tenants, the cockroaches.
But they weren't paying, were they? Were the cockroaches paying?
No, they were hurting them dearly.
But, this is the other thing, just kind of highlighting, I think you do, by buying your first property, you start to realize the sweat equity that's got to go into repair it, to improve it, to market it, and then you get your first tenants. And at least for me, when I first started out, like, I was very naive. I trusted everyone, and I believed when someone called and said, "Hey, I've had a checkered past, but I'm good now." I believed them because,
you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you sound nice, and then they tell you, "I'm going to pay you every month," and then after the first month, the check didn't come. I'll pay you next month. I had this come up. Well, when you have the same aunt that dies 3 times, it's like. But my point is with that, there is a level of callous that has to develop in discipline.
Yeah.
How have you guys found that rhythm?
Man, that's tough. I ask a lot of investors who are more seasoned than I, and it's kind of it's an assumptive question, but I say, how do you keep yourself from being cynical in this, in kind of that landlord-tenant business? And some of them are just flat out cynical. But I do
it's
feel
what
like
it does to you, right?
It does.
People disappoint you.
I think there's one investor I'm thinking of particularly who has over 100 doors and has been very wise about it. But he is not cynical. He's wise, he's shrewd, but he's not cynical. And watching him operate gives me hope that there is a way to interact with the messiness of people, provide a service to them, and enter into that, but not have it sour you.
I think rubbing shoulders with investors and getting to hear some of the horror stories that are out there and some of the bad experiences, and especially working with Jeff, he has a property management company now. So, I mean, we get to interact and rub shoulders with this all the time. And I think for me, when I started, that kind of helped, me and for my business moving forward. It's like, man, if you set up systems up front and have those strict kind of, screening things up front, the background checks and the applications, and you can find good tenants the first time, you're less likely to have those bad experiences.
One of my mentors taught me this phrase, and I catch myself using it a lot, is to use discernment, or to, if someone's calling in and they're frustrated or angry and they want you to change something that you're doing, the line that I have used, and I give this to other people, is to say, "We wish we could." So when you hear that, you're at least acknowledging what the other person's saying, but you got to refer back to that policy, that rule, that thing. And there's a reason why those things exist, but it's not like being nasty or negative, but I'm saying we wish we could. We cannot do that.
Kind of pass the buck to the rule manual.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. And
Aren't you the CEO? No, my hands are tied.
He's an asshole.
Wish I was. Wish I was.
Yeah, right.
But what I've seen with the property management, so I could manage my own stuff. I'm capable of doing it, but I have our company manage it. And I will be in the office and I'll watch one of our leasing agents take the phone call from one of my tenants, and they will ask about something. They'll inquire, "Hey, it's like, can you waive the late fee this month? Or can I have a cat?" and all that stuff.
How about 3 cats? What I love. And then I have a small dog, but it's 70 pounds.
I had someone tell me
Since when?
For my tenant that I got in my duplex, he was like, "I have a small Great Dane."
Yeah, exactly.
I was like,
it's just
I
a
don't
smaller
think
version.
so, pal.
He's a puppy. He's a 150-pound puppy. But the management company, what it does is somehow by not talking to the owner, but by talking to an employee, there's this barrier there, right? So then the employee says, she doesn't have the decision-making power to push something through. She's going to consult with the owner. So I've intentionally offloaded that and created that barrier. And it's the same thing. If you're self-managing, you can look to the lease and say, hey, we signed this. This lease protects both parties involved. And, you know, we wish we could, but here's what it says. The management company does the same thing, and it's worth its weight in gold.
That's awesome. One of the reasons I'm so excited that you guys are here today, I mean, you guys have been to Bell Fountain before, and, you know, I was glad to be able to take you guys out for lunch and everything today, but you are on this journey of starting a podcast yourself, the Reinvest podcast. You know, maybe just share a little bit about that, better coming from you than me.
I think a podcast is something that gets thrown around. You know, if you're a millennial and you don't have a podcast, like, what are you doing? What are you doing in your life?
You're a fake.
No, so we've been thinking about it for a long time. We went to a real estate investing conference in February in Denver, Colorado, called the Best Ever Conference. And that kind of gave us the push to pursue what we had wanted to do for a while.
And it really showed us the importance of the podcast, because you think of a podcast and you're like, well, if I'm not going to be really successful, what's the point? Or if it's not going to be some way to drive income, what's the point? Why would I spend time on it? And it really kind of opened up, like, there's more to a podcast than just becoming like famous, quote unquote. You know what I mean? It's like more than just driving income towards you, but it gives you a lot of credibility and a platform to reach and to communicate and to talk with people that you have no business talking to. And so it's really been an excuse for us to reach out to certain people that we wouldn't normally have conversations with. And it's beneficial for Garrett and I, because we get to learn. We get to talk to big time investors and people that are like way more successful than we are, and just ask them questions. And not only is it benefiting us, but it's going to benefit our audience as people listen in the future.
Yeah, whenever you're forced to communicate something, it solidifies it in yourself. It's kind of the law of being a teacher. It's weird. We sat down over lunch the other day with investors up from North Carolina, and I got there late. Jeff was already there, and I walk in, and the lady's like, "You're the guy from the podcast."
Wow.
And I was like, I am he.
Yes, I am.
It sounded so more legit than it was, but it does give this weird psychological credibility. We were talking about the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, just being honest, like we're all reaching. And I think when you're a lifelong learner, you are always looking at where you can grow still. And so you don't put a lot of stock in like getting comfortable with like, oh, that's what I know. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, it creates this humility in you. We're meeting with people, like you said, that we probably have no business meeting with, and we probably do because we're good at what we do. I mean, undeniably, but I just see there's so much more that we can learn, and it is such a cool model to learn from other people. And people like to be on podcasts. I mean, people like to talk about themselves, right?
Yeah,
so.
And it's a good tool for us to like potential clients, new relationships. Hey, if you want to know more, if you want to learn more. Boom, podcast. And they're like, what? You got a podcast? And I'm like, yeah, we're kind of a big deal.
How many views per episode? Wow, let's not get in the details. Let's not get in the weeds.
The sponsorship dollars are coming. But no, compliment you guys. So one of the businesses that we really enjoy working with and we admire is Chad and Dash and Joey's. And you guys did a business spotlight, interviewing Chad, like hearing his story of why he started his business. Yeah. And Chad's father, Lyle, has he been a guest yet, or he will be a guest at some point? Lyle Inslee.
Yeah, he was one of our first ones, and
That's
I actually
great,
liked it because Chad shared one side of the story and Lyle shared his. And they kind of went on that father-son venture together, starting in Lima, and then eventually moving out to Bell Fountain, and it's just really cool. So like if you are curious about that story, I would encourage you to go check out Lyle's episode here on this podcast. Yeah. And Chad's on your
Chad
podcast.
had a roach incident as well. He coined a term called a cockapede, which are those big fuzzy. They look like centipedes and they move too quickly. And
are they protein in those? Can we blend it in a protein shake?
Dash and Joey's, baby.
You know what? That could be a good little twist. I'm sure there would be somebody out there that'd be like, wow, that's so exotic, and you mark it up. But no, he was bootstrapping in the basement and had some of those crawling on him. But yeah, no, so why we did that, and I'm glad you brought that up, is like you guys, we want to be champions of local communities. I don't know if I always saw the importance of this. Well, I know I didn't. I was just kind of blind to it. But once we started paying attention and rubbing shoulders with our clients, a lot of our clients are business owners. and they're now reinvesting their hard-earned capital back into community, our community, through the form of real estate. And I started to rub shoulders with them and see what they were doing and their contribution. Like, these are the salt of communities. So we were like, man, if we could be known for one thing as a real estate team, what do we want to be known for? And it was championing small and local businesses. So Chad was kind of the pilot for us, and he's just a great dude. So it was very easy to do that with.
He was so chill. Yeah. It was just like easy for him to plug in and to be able to talk to him about some of that stuff. And yeah, it's really given us something to look forward to in the future, already kind of starting to plan. And what other local businesses in our area can we really come alongside and encourage and have them on our next business spotlight?
Yeah.
Love that. And I think marketing, part of what we have to do is always be storytelling, always be putting a spotlight on things that are happening. And it just adds to a richness of why your community matters, and the people and the players that are a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you were previously here. I know, Garrett, you've been here a couple of times, right?
Yeah.
With the tour in Bell Fountain. But you were here for kind of the development field trip, right? With some of the cool things that are happening in downtown Lima. Do you care to share any light on that?
Yeah, I mean, just to credit you guys, it's cool that when people begin looking at their own communities and asking questions about how to revitalize it, Small Nation always comes up in that conversation because of what you guys have done. So I know when I came down 3 years ago, I was floored. And oddly enough, I'd never heard of Bell Fountain, but that wasn't so much because of me, or it was because of me. I was kind of under a rock. Once I started to talk to people, they were like, man, there's some awesome things happening there. And even in the last 3 years, things have changed here. I've just seen that. So, there's some really neat things happening in Lima. And you guys have been kind of the forerunners in how to do that. Even in a metro that's, I don't know if I call Lima a metro, but a larger city, those principles are still applicable. And that's why we spent the time to come down with a couple of teams.
Appreciate that. I think that the model that we've been deploying is really focused around real estate. Is how do you buy and invest in that historic real estate that's in your urban core? How do you actively recruit tenants? And in some towns and communities, recruiting isn't possible. So you have to find people that are willing to start those businesses. And then getting access to capital. I mean, I think just working with professionals, bankers, if you're buying real estate, maybe it's a realtor that can actually get you access to capital. And then it's being able to market and promote what's happening in your town. And I think we have been learning through incremental development over about 15 years. And it started just like we were talking about Dash and Joey's Juice Bar with local food.
Yeah.
And then once you get the local food, then it's the shop boutiques, it's the hair salons. And then probably the piece that we as real estate investors can do the most to help right now is we need housing. And housing that's not just luxury, but also affordable.
Right.
Because for a restaurant, if you don't have housing for the people washing dishes, you don't have a restaurant. Isn't that right? I mean, you ran a beer barrel. And
it's hard to get those people. I mean, because those are the jobs people don't want to do. And even near the end, when I was exiting Beer Barrel, I mean, that was like one of the positions that was always a challenge. And we were paying them more sometimes than the other positions in the kitchen, just because it was such a job that people didn't want to do. It felt low end, even if you weren't getting paid low end. And so, you got to provide for those people to keep those people in your team.
I'm just looking at one of the banners you guys have up here. Investing in people as well as places has that potential to significantly compound your returns. And that's one of the things I've admired. And I think the groups that we are helping from a real estate perspective are asking the question, how do we develop people to then occupy the real estate we're developing? Right. And you're going down to the source, and the greatest resource is always people. Where did you get the skill set to develop people like that? Because that's hard.
You learn. I mean, it's not perfect. It's probably like, as you guys are thinking and you raising your families, like some of it is just recognizing you being the version of the person that you needed when you started out. And I think that for me, it's been, knowing what my superpower is that I can see potential. Potential might be of what a rundown old building could be with the right investment, the right design, the right inputs. I also believe that one of my skill sets is seeing someone's potential. Maybe they haven't found that right industry, or they haven't found that right, they're weird. They haven't found where they can actually invest it time-wise to get the return with that. And what's great about entrepreneurship, it's such a broad field that you need creatives that, would love to sit all day long and draw logos. Like that's like, I love those people. And I love people that see dreams in colors. But on the same token, you need CPAs that are very black and white, that kind of check and balance the creatives to say, listen, I love all of your ideas and passion, but how are we going to pay for this? And so I think that's what's kind of neat about the landscape of entrepreneurship is you get to find people that have these unique gifts and skill sets, and you help them kind of be in their lane to see that flourish and grow.
So looking at the Bell Fountain, kind of the model in this community, what was the point where you guys hit critical mass?
In the early days, and a lot of the guests that we've had on early in this podcast have been sharing the stories of the feelings of loneliness, have been sharing the stories of hearing no after no after no, and then really very loud voices criticizing, condemning, and complaining. I think what started to change it when there were a few of us that started banding together saying, we are doubling down on this town and we are going to create success together. And it's just like the way that two of you work together. Maybe there wasn't even a formal business partnership, but it was aligned around a vision. It was aligned around values, and those values were grit, meaning that we're not afraid of hard work. The values were around we want to go ahead and think that we won't be successful. We will prove you wrong.
Right.
So it was that
stubbornness there.
Stubbornness and actually being comfortable with breaking some rules. And I think that part of changing a community, if something's been status quo for a long time and your community is going in the wrong direction, then we have to break the status quo.
Right. Because what you're doing today is suitable for the outcomes for today. So if you're not doing anything different, how are you going to change?
And, I think those of us that are leaders also have a little bit of low-level anxiety where we're competitive, we are driven, and we want to innovate. So like I'm thinking and studying, why I love that all of our downtown restaurants have outdoor patios in the public right away. That was a brand new innovative concept 10 years ago. But when COVID hit, it sped everything up. And so about every restaurant that you go to now has an outdoor dining, area directly next to it. So where my brain's at, we've been talking about the rental arbitrage. We've been talking about shared office spaces and co-working. But I'm now thinking about, and things on our radar, is how do we create the pop-up shop location in our town that allows those home-based businesses to pop up and rent for a week, rent for a day.
Yeah.
And just new ways to fractionalize the use of our real estate, our community. And I think we have to innovate. That's part of what we have to do.
Yeah. You're almost talking about taking a farmer's market concept, but allowing that to happen year round, and where somebody can kind of sit at home and say, I've been thinking about this idea for a while, but now have a ton of overhead, and then pursue it, test the waters a little bit. Even you were saying from a videography standpoint, you invested in all this equipment prior to having this job here.
Yeah.
That was already a passion of yours. And there's people out there that have hobbies that they're spending money on right now, and it doesn't make sense. And they're one step away from making it into a business.
Well, and in the hybrid work environment that many corporations are going to, even if you're working for a very large corporation, but you have all these dreams and ambitions, there is paths for you to do that today. More than probably there ever was in the past. So from a real estate perspective, a lot of people criticize and say, office space is dead. Well, they're right that the old version of office space is dead.
Right.
But innovating and repurposing properties, that's what we get paid the big bucks to like creatively figure out and do. And I think places like Lima and Bell Fountain are some of the best places in the country. There's a reason why we've had lots of guests on talking about Ohio winning right now.
Yeah.
And because we're affordable, we've got a great workforce, we've got great education, but like what's specifically going for Lima and Bell Fountain is we have real estate that you can actually do and create anything.
Yeah.
And for a really reasonable cost.
And when you're in a community where there's been blight, or you've been trending in the wrong direction for a while, and you're just starting to rebound, people know and are more receptive to change because they're discontent with the condition things are in today. And so we're starting to see that. There's a lot of investment. I mean, John Hafey, who owns the Beer Barrel franchise, is pouring a ton of money into the downtown of Lima. Yeah. But what's cool about Lima is it's not just one private investor, one business owner. There's probably a dozen people right now who are corporations, private investment groups, and they have the excitement behind from the local government. And it's crazy when you create that synergy. And I wish I could tell you that everybody was like playing nice in the midst of it. That's kind of
never
a glorified.
works that way.
But yeah, everybody still wants to see Lima win. So as long as they can kind of get their piece and add value.
The perception's slowly changing. I'm sure it took a while for people in Bellefontaine to feel that way, but people in Lima still are like, Lima's dumpy. Lima doesn't have anything. Lima's just basically one large circle of low-end houses. You know what I mean? People kind of have that
even
perception.
After 15 years of doing this, and we're pretty darn proud of the town, there's still a large group of people that says we have not made it because there's not a Long John Silver's here.
Interesting.
If you guys from Lima,
if we can place a Long John Silver,
if you can place a Long John Silver's, I can go out in public and we can say that we've made it. But my point is, I kind of didn't answer your question, Garrett, but like it took that 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years, there was the shift that when project number 3 turned to 5, then when we got to project number 20, project number 30, then it's kind of like what you were describing. There is now not just one investor creating the vision. There's 5 investors and 5 entrepreneurs. And part of that, not everyone getting along, you can hold hands and hope that everyone will kumbaya. That just doesn't exist. You kind of want the different groups because they represent different people, different ideas.
Capitalism.
Welcome to America, right? Mm-hmm. That's America. So if you want to see a different type of business, a different type of investing happening, go do it.
Right.
Welcome. Right. Join the party.
Right.
Absolutely. And to those listeners who, you might be listening from another small town, anywhere in the country, because they exist everywhere, and you are resonating with some of these things being said, whether you feel like your community is sad and underrated and things like that. I do want to say, we are working hard and rapidly towards some resources to be able to put in front of you to help, get those people on the same conversation. We see the need for it. And so I'm excited that, the direction we're heading with that. So,
and just to add to that, I wish that someone, when I first started out, gave me a blueprint.
Yeah.
Gave me at least some place to like know where to start. Like, what is the very first thing that if I want to see my town that's struggling, or my town that is losing its young people, businesses are closing, has all these empty buildings, is there a blueprint of what is the very first step and thing that I should do? We've got it. And we've been working to develop, because I wish when I was starting out that someone would have given that to me.
Yeah.
Right.
As we're kind of rounding third here on this episode, I really appreciate that, especially that last part of that conversation. But what are some of the professional development resources, such as books, podcasts, professional groups, even conferences? I know you said conferences are kind of a big thing that were pivotal for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, conferences in general, I would say provide that opportunity. The best ever conference was a first. Admittedly, I've not been to a ton of.
Who's the founder of that? Do you know?
Joe Fairless.
Fairless. Okay.
Yep. Ashcroft Capital, and going to a conference allows you to kind of get out of the norm and create space to think and work on the business versus just kind of be in the business. And then reading. Reading is really good. Crushing It is a great real estate investing book if you're looking for somebody who's a problem solver and finds value that other people just don't find.
Yeah. Like I had already mentioned earlier in the podcast, Bigger Pockets for as far as on the real estate investing side. Just a lot of great resources, a lot of good material, a lot of practical experience. Some of it, you're kind of looking at people's success stories, but there's still just so much you can glean from different investment strategies. And then really rubbing shoulders with, find another person or other people or another group that's doing it, and then go rub shoulders with them.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to be in a real estate investing. So I was like, I'm going to work at the real estate investing brokerage. I'm going to go work at Hartstock, and I'm going to learn from Jeff, and I'm going to learn from Garrett. And, we do an investor meetup now, and that's a great place for people to come and learn that are new, and really start figuring out how practical real estate investing is. So,
yeah, learn by being submerged in it, right? Jason, why don't you go ahead and hit us with our recap for the day?
I think the biggest thing that I walk away with you guys is how you're always looking for ways to add value. Whether that's putting that spotlight on the local business, whether it's, I love the story that you shared that someone that you had been giving advice and tools and resources to, they ended up not even using you as the agent for that particular deal,
right?
But you still wanted to add value to them in your life. And I think it's that way of when you contribute, when you give, maybe not right there at that time, you're not cashing that check or getting that commission, but it is kind of that karmic bank account that it will come back to you and it will come back to your community. So I just appreciate you guys sharing that tip. And obviously I think that that's what's contributing to you, the success you're having financially, but also the success you're having in life. And I just really admire that.
Yeah. And to our listeners, I was also so excited that they agreed to be on the podcast because they're doing great things with their podcast. So if you are someone looking to learn about real estate investing and you need those, the spoon-fed information on, the places to get started, highly recommend their podcast as you break down, all kinds of different things, whether it's like, what does syndication mean? What does,
Right.
So I love that. So if that's what you're looking for, I 100%, recommend that you go check it out, follow them. They're doing a lot of cool things. Where else can people find you online?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Facebook. We have a Facebook page that we kind of co-brand together.
Yeah, that's Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo, realtors with Hartstock Realty. And then, our personal LinkedIns.
Cool. We'll stalk you. We'll find you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in and checking out the Small Nation podcast. You can find us anywhere that you listen to your podcast, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even the Small Nation YouTube channel. I hope you were able to pull some value from that conversation, and we hope to see you in the next one. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, comment, or a 5-star review to help more people to discover this podcast. Stay tuned on social media to keep up with all the cool projects that are happening here. And until next time, this is Ethan with the Small Nation podcast signing off. Thanks, guys.